Right, well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming despite the storm. So first, yeah, a little bit more about myself. So I'm a software developer. I work mostly with AI and cloud solutions, both for other businesses, and then I have a couple of my own independent personal projects, which I'll get to in a sec. And the thing that really drives me, I think maybe comes from the fact that I did math. I really love like hard challenges. So whenever there's a very specific problem in a business or some kind of domain, like it really interests me to find the specific solution for the problem that no one else really wants to solve. There's this article from E16Z from actually a couple of years ago now, where they talk about their current thesis, which is that now with AI we can really tackle markets and problems that were deemed too complicated or too small, because software is way more rigid than a piece of paper is, for example. But now with AI we can really tackle that, and this is my motivation for a lot of the things that I do. I also like to mention that if you want the slides for this presentation, because I'm going to put a lot of links and resources, you can just send me an email or contact me on LinkedIn. But maybe a little bit about the photo. So this is the photo that I used to promote this event. In parallel to the work that I do, as a hobby, I also have a YouTube channel where I talk a lot about old school tech, like old programming languages, first computers, and really like things that you don't really get to touch anymore. But I'm a big geek when it comes to tech history and the history of computer science. So if you like that, you can check out my YouTube channel as well. So on the topic of tech history, I thought we could start this by taking a trip down memory lane to see how the notion of user experience really came to be. So if we take a look at the very first computers and the way we used to interact with them is of course completely different, because nowadays we command what the computer does, right? Like we click the buttons, we tell it what to do, shout at it from time to time when it takes time to load. But back in the day, the computer would be the thing that would rule us, and we would have to accommodate it. So I don't know if anyone in the room remembers punch cards, I don't know. But the way it used to work back in the day is that you would get one of these, feed it to the computer, and then wait hours or even days for it to get any kind of response. So there was no interaction, there was no really user experience. You just had to accommodate the computer and hope and pray that whatever you punched on your card here would work. Then, of course, we had the CLI, which is still alive and kicking, but it came kind of popular since the 70s. So the logic behind it is that you type something in the command line and you get real-time feedback right away, which, I mean, it's easy explained like that, but especially back in the day, you had to memorize a lot of the commands. There was, of course, no AI assistant. And if we were to try to use these languages that they used in the past, it's a lot more complex than now, I would say. But it's still an interface that is still popular today. A lot of developers, myself included, would argue that it's a very intuitive way to interact with a computer because you get real-time feedback. And yeah, a lot of people agree because this is how we get to tools like this. But more on this in a sec. So what interests us today is the infamous GUI, which is the graphical user interface, which we are all used to. The first time that it appeared is called the mother of all demos. So you might think that this is maybe a bit of an exaggerated term, but I actually want to show you some clips from this demo to show you actually how revolutionary this was. So let me see if... Yeah, no, I just wanted to show you that the mother of all demos. So here you can really see a person using the mouse for the very first time. So you have the hardware that goes with it. So keyboard and mouse like we use today. You have the very first time that we see a cursor pointing at things as well. The notion of different windows, selection, and things like that. And if you really think about it, like the way that we interact with our computers has literally stayed the same. Like, there was a big jump from punch cards to this, but from this demo to now, I mean, we still use the computer the same way, basically. Another thing that I want to share is Xerox, because here you can also see, so this is from the 80s, and again, you have like the same hardware that we use now. I think they show the mouse at some point. So this has stayed the same, and if you look at the very first icons, it's literally like the same thing that we use now. So documents and folders, it's in no way a new invention that we have from a couple of years ago. It's really something that has followed us since the beginning of computer science. So now if I go back to my presentation, yeah. So, okay. So now like the tables have turned, and it's the computer that serves to accommodate the user and not the other way around. So just, again, a little example of how much we've evolved or haven't. Here we have Xerox from the 80s, Windows XP, and the current iOS icons. And it's really, yeah, pretty much the same thing. So from a user experience point of view, things haven't really changed much. But you might be thinking, you know, like we're in this AI advancement community. What about this guy? Like how, like this is the most innovative and revolutionary thing of our time, right? Well, I would argue that in terms of user experience, these two are kind of the same thing, because both in ChatGPT and in an old computer with just the command line, it's text only. I mean, yeah, you could say ChatGPT, you can add images, you can like give it all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, you have to instruct it what to do, you have to describe things. So in both of these cases, the way you interact with it is pretty much the same. If you want to find something in the conversation, you don't just click buttons, you just have to scroll in the conversation to find something in both of these cases. And you also need to give it quite precise commands. Like, of course, in this case, you need to learn a specific language and like memorize all the different shortcuts and commands. With ChatGPT, you do have to, like, you can speak English with it. However, if you've been using these tools for a while, you know that the way you prompt highly affects the output that you get. So when users are faced with this, they have to become prompt engineers to really make the most of it. And at the end of the day, when you're faced with a chat interface, you're really outsourcing the complexity of it to the user, because it's the user who has to prompt, it's the user who has to interpret the results and figure out if there's a hallucination, if the chat needs to be put back on track. And in my opinion, we're not really making the most of AI if we're just using it as a chatbot. Now let's talk a little bit about how the history of ChatGPT and the infamous interface came to be, because for the previous demos, these were developed, you know, by researchers, computer scientists. A lot of thought went into it, and I would argue that this is also why we're still using the same kind of logic. Whereas with ChatGPT, the history of how it came to be is completely different. So it started out as an MVP, because so OpenAI engineers, they initially wanted to build a super assistant, but quite a specific one. So they had adapted the model that they used behind it to many different use cases. But whenever they would give it to test users, people kind of wanted to use it more and more in other cases too. And so they found themselves not really knowing how people would interact with it. And so to get more data, they built this chat interface in about 10 days, released it just to get some extra learnings, continue the research, and see how people would interact with it. They built it right before the winter holidays, hoping that, you know, they will get some data when they come back from the break, but it went completely viral. And so now we're stuck with this chat interface that was never really meant to be because of their massive success. And now, don't get me wrong, like I think the chat interface is great in so many ways, and it is definitely revolutionary and deserves the success that it got. But ever since that success, I think a lot of people kind of misinterpreted it to mean that it would also work for their specific use case, in that it is specifically the open-ended chat interface that led to the success and not other things. And I found this quite interesting survey from a couple of years ago that pointed out that a lot of people don't want to use AI because it is simply too hard to interact with, because this open-ended interface scares people away. They don't really know what to ask it, and it can be a little bit intimidating. And what's even more interesting is that whenever people are asked their opinion on AI or dig a little deeper into like why you find it hard to interact with, people point at the visual features and the user experience rather than the models. And I think you've probably noticed it yourself, like whenever a new model comes out, you see all of these amazing benchmarks and models are getting better and better, and yet as a user, you don't really perceive it because the interface stays the same. You still have the same chatbot, and unless there are extra features, you don't really see the innovation behind it. Another quite interesting survey that is still in the process of coming out. So this is literally from a couple of weeks ago, so we'll see more results. But they asked about 2.5 enterprises and businesses about the chatbots that they were rolling out. And actually 74% of them had to completely shut them down because of user experience and other different problems. And it's important to point out that here we're really talking about tools in production, so not really prototypes or not people testing things out, but people who've deployed chatbots and had to shut them down for many reasons. The first of which was governance and issues related to security. I think maybe some of you have heard of this story for, I think it was Canadian Airlines, who had a massive disaster with their chatbot because it would give false answers to their users, and people would ask for a refund or something like that, and the chatbot would like make things up, and they ended up in a lawsuit. So there is like a serious security issue. But another issue is that when you look at engineering teams developing these kind of tools, they actually spend most of the time focusing on safety and basically no time focusing on the experience. And so by the time the safety guardrails are in place, users already want something else. They've tried out other tools, their expectations are higher, and so when they're faced with this chatbot that was in the process of developing for a couple of months, they've already moved on and want something else. And I'm curious to see what other results come from the survey, but so far this is very telling. But now, like, let's try to see some good examples of AI, because I don't want to like discourage you and say that implementing AI in your business is completely useless. So the examples I want to give are, as it has been mentioned, I quite like participating in hackathons. And I often see kind of like the main ideas that come up every now and then, every time there's something around AI. And a use case that you see very often is like building an AI agent for travel, right? A lot of people seem to think that this is something that would work super well, because like if you go back in time, we used to have travel agencies, and why not just like talk to a bot about your trip and see what comes out of it. But if you look at a company that has been super successful in the traveling industry, Airbnb, they don't actually go with the chat AI agent interface. Now, this is just a quote from their CTO saying that they don't want to go with the chatbot interface because there's too much text. It's not map native, which is like what a travel agent should be. And most importantly, you can't manipulate it directly. So you can't, like you always have to describe what you want, whereas things like having a price slider or being able to select multiple boxes is so much more efficient than describing the prompt over and over, especially like if you're planning a trip with friends as well. You need everyone to be on the same page, everyone to see different things. And so their approach so far has been to hide their AI layer and use much more simple manipulation buttons and sliders and so on. Another interesting use case that I think all business owners dream of is having an AI agent for go-to-market, especially like when you're trying to start your business, you're not really sure of like what kind of client you're targeting, you want more information about them, like trying to find your perfect target persona. And so a lot of people might think that, again, talking to an agent about this will solve the issue. But if we look at the most successful AI go-to-market tool like Play, they use a sort of mixed approach. So their whole UI is based around pretty much like an Excel spreadsheet, which like when I first started using the tool, I was like, okay, so this is like the most innovative we can really be. But their approach is quite genius, actually, because on one hand, like if you want to find your potential clients. You do have an AI agent you can chat with here. But when you give it all the information you need, when you brainstorm with it, it fills out the different fields for you. And so when you want to edit something, when you want to duplicate the same method for another table that you have, you can just easily add extra things or manipulate it how you like. And so this erases the issue of having to prompt over and over. So this shows us that you can have sort of a hybrid approach depending on what your input and output should be. And lastly, also another study that I wanted to share. So where they analyzed mobile apps on both iOS and Android marketplaces. And now we're at the stage where like more than half of apps use AI. However, when you look at reviews, only about 12% of users mention it. And we're kind of back to like good old business logic, is that users don't really care about your features. They care about if you solve their problem, right? And it's the same with AI. So if you're worried that, if you don't mention AI, you're going to miss out and your users are not going to like your product, that's totally false, because at the end of the day, people don't care if you use AI or not. They care about, if their problem is solved or not. So now I want to share a little framework that I use to figure out what kind of interface would work best for my AI use case. And I like to see it as on an axis, so with input and output. So if we go to the extreme here, if your user has a standard input, like they click a button every time, and a deterministic output, so they also get the same thing every time, kind of like in the Airbnb use case where you can select a slider and it's always deterministic, then just like go with regular graphic interfaces like buttons, sliders, checkboxes, etc. On the opposite end, you have both a variable input and a variable output. So this is where your ChatGPT lies, which is good for brainstorming because it gives different results every time. You can really give it anything, and in those use cases, it can work. But it's really these two other quadrants that are really interesting. So here, when you have a standard input, when a user, again, presses a button or something, but they want different replies, you can think of it as sort of like a dashboard or something that is interchangeable. So I think this use case is quite good for things like financial analysis, where you do want the analysis to be performed every day, but depending on what happens that day, like the different news, the different things that come up change. And so you can present it in a way that is variable without also having to, for the user to describe it every single time, because the initial action is always the same. And then here, this is what I showed with Clay and their AI assistant. So when your user is not really sure what they want actually, but your job as a software or product is to organize their thoughts. And this is exactly Clay's use case, where you brainstorm with them about your customer, and then they sort everything in a nice table for you. And this kind of approach reminds me, I don't know if you know this meme where the user doesn't know what they want, but they want it, and then it's your job as a developer to figure out what it is they actually want to do. So this is just, I would say, the surface of what you need to think about when you're designing AI-first UI. But there are other things that you need to pay attention to. Like, so here we talked about the clarity and determinism, but it's also quite important to see like this point, for example, like if your users are experienced or not with what they have to do, like do they have to be guided all the way through with extra buttons, or are they like professional developers with an empty CLI and they just know what to do? And again, of course, like certain security risks, what context you need to give it, and so on and so forth. And now, yeah, as I said, for the slides, let me know if you want me to send this over, but here I just kind of brainstorm about the different UI use cases you can use using the framework that I showed before. But now, without further ado, I want to talk about like my personal projects and things that I've developed for my clients using this approach. And the first one is Looks Pricer. So fun fact, I have a consignment store where I buy and sell luxury handbags. And the thing that comes up literally every day is the problem of assigning prices, because you need to kind of know fashion trends, know what's selling, keep in mind your own margin. And so this is a very tedious task because it requires a lot of research and a lot of experience. And so when I decided to tackle it and develop something for it, the prototype for it was just a simple chatbot. And when I started showing it to users, I really realized that this approach does not work at all, because the action that they want to perform to estimate the price of a particular handbag is always going to be the same. Like, you don't want to type over and over, like, can you please estimate the price of this or that? And additionally, the output that it gives would be different every single time. Like, sometimes it would give a price range, other times it would give this like whole paragraph about information, which is nice, but if you're using it on the go, you always want the output to be the same. And so this is, so I realized that this particular use case is really here. Like, you want a simple button at the beginning, and then you want the output to be at least shaped the same every single time. And so now the product that we have is a lot more complex in the backend. Like, we're using Playwright for web scraping, we're using Perplexity for in-depth search, we're calculating all kinds of statistics. But if you look at the UI alone, here I have a little demo video, it really became super, super simple. Like, you just upload a photo, the AI parses it for you. So here you can see the user can also edit things. So there's a nice little human in the loop element if they're not satisfied. And then for the report, it has the same shape every time. So we still kept the text element for extra information with sources. But then we always have the same price range. We have the plots. And so even if the backend for this AI system is a lot more complex, we've basically simplified the UI a lot to fit the user's needs. Now let me see how much time I have for the other. Oh, yeah, okay, great. So for the second use case I want to present, so this is something that I'm working on with Ulrich. Hello. So we are developing a sort of AI agent for truck drivers. So here the idea is that when a person is driving, they of course can't use their phones. So we came up with an app that lets them control their interface with voice. So here I have a little demo as well. So here, like, the user can speak to it, leave different messages that they can also validate on the go. And most importantly, they can pass to the next step in their journey and communicate that as well quite quickly. So they can just say that, like, OK, I'm here. And then it automatically switches to the next step. So this is another way where the input is quite variable, but the output performs the same actions every time. So it's either going to the next step of the journey, or leaving a message, or controlling other aspects of the app, but it's still quite deterministic every time. And the driver doesn't need to be distracted to talk to a chatbot. Now for an example that uses live agents, here I'm just left a link with a resource by Google on how to design one yourself. But this is, so again, going back to the fashion store aspect of things. So this serves to digitize your wardrobe or your inventory if you're a store. And so here in the demo, I think I didn't record my microphone for this, but I'm basically like showing the clothes that I have, talking to it, and in the conversation and through video, it fills out the different fields for me and creates a nice product looking photo for it. And I prefer this approach for this particular task because clothes is, first of all, very different. So the input, it can be very variable, and it's nice for an agent to tell you maybe to take a step back to get a better photo, to zoom in for specific details if you want to put the item on sale. And basically the whole process becomes a lot easier because, yeah, you're just guided by a live agent there. And then I think maybe I can show, yeah, so here, yeah, mostly for the input, it is quite variable because, yeah, there are different items of clothing that you can have, but the output that you get is like a nice inventory, so it is also deterministic. Now for this last one, I wanted to show it to you live. So this is a tool that I developed for Adobe Express. And here, again, the process is pretty much hidden. And the reason I want to show this example is also because I give the user the option to opt out of AI, because I think, as you know, in the design world, AI is not always welcome because it's basically trained on other people's artworks, and there's a bit of an ethical concern amongst designers. So I give the users the option to opt out of it. And here in the back end, I'm actually using kind of more specialized and traditional machine learning models trained specifically for vectorization. So I'm not using generative AI. Here I am again in the case where there is a lot of AI going on in the background, but what I'm presenting to the user is just simple buttons and a simple outcome. Now, lastly, I want to touch on the difference between UX, usability, and just overall visual design and aesthetics using this calculator example again. So this is again from the Xerox that I showed you at the beginning. So usability is honestly mostly about how like usable and evident the app is to use. So in the calculator use case, like, does it have all the necessary buttons? Can it like add, subtract things? So it's not really about how easy it is to use. It's like, does it have all the features or not, basically. Now, UX is a bit of a broader term, but it's mostly about how you use the app end to end. So let's say like how fast it loads, if when you're like holding this calculator app in your hand, are all the buttons positioned in a way that is easy for you to use? If you need a scientific calculator, this would not be the best user experience because you would want to manipulate fractions and things like that. And then lastly, you have visual design and aesthetics, which is, I think, the most obvious here in the evolution here, which is kind of intertwined with user experience in a way, because as I showed you in Xerox and even in the icons that we use now, we use objects from real life to represent the functions in a computer. So even if it seems like an aesthetic choice, it is also intertwined with usability, because then the user gets to understand like what it actually is for. But when you're designing a chatbot for usability, you really need to think about these particular things, like, is it easy for the user to go to the next step? Is all the context really there? Are there any boundaries? Like if you're using a customer relation chatbot, like, are you sure it's not going to go anywhere else and give false information? Does the tool need human approval as well, like what I showed with Lux Pricer, when you can change things and edit things on the go? And also, is the output persistent? I think this is quite important, because if you open the same app the next day, is your conversation going to be gone, or is it going to stay in the history as you would want it to stay? So this is pretty much it for me from now. I think the two lessons that I would like to leave you with is, first of all, I think innovation is supposed to be simple. So let's keep things linear or exponential, but not go back when it comes to usability and user design, because we've come so far already. And I think with the chatbot, there is a little bit of like a regression here sometimes. And also, as I said, if you are building a product that is AI first, it doesn't have to be visible if it takes away from the user experience. Like, you're not going to miss out on the AI wave if you don't explicitly show it anywhere, because at the end of the day, users just care if you're solving their problems or not. So I think it's time that I open this conversation up for discussion. Maybe again, to conclude, feel free to connect with me, ask me for the slides. And what I do is I offer custom software like apps, data extraction. Like another project that I'm working on right now is extracting data from Fitbit watches. So anything that is like very custom specific that you don't find solutions for, I'm your girl. And I also do a little bit of consulting when it comes to AI strategy and cloud solutions. So if you're migrating to the cloud or you want to optimize things in the cloud, I can help you out with Azure, AWS, you name it. And yeah, so I think maybe the question that I would like to ask you to kick off the discussion is if you yourself have had any like terrible user experience moments when it comes to AI, specifically chatbots. If anything comes to mind, let me know.
If there are any questions from the audience, also you can write and we will read for you. But if you have any question from the audience,
or just like share your experience, things you've seen.
I have one, which is what is your experience on about the design lately with the generative AI? Because I remember that last year, for example, in 2025, the building the design, so building all the UX was quite average. If you ask the whatever the AI, OpenAI, Claude to do it, but lately I feel that there was a switch from the last few months. And what is your experience on that? Because mine personally, for the moment, I changed my mind about that by thinking that now also completely unexperienced people might have quite a good, let's say, UI, UX. What is your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think I'm mostly of the same opinion, because when things started out, like you could easily see if something was vibe coded or not, especially when it comes to like a purple gradient or like emojis everywhere. Like that was the go-to sign. And when I like started experimenting with these tools, I found that, I mean, again, like with everything, you have to be quite specific in your prompt. And if you give it sources of inspiration and kind of tell it the style that it should code things in, then it does that. Like for the closet organization app that I showed, I don't know if you saw, but the icons, I made them with like clay animation style. So you can just, yeah, tell it the source of inspiration, show it other things, and going from there. But it is true that recently, I think they've realized that there is an issue with designs looking similar, and it got a lot better. But I do still think that when it comes to specifically usability and UX, it's not something that's going to be immediate unless you really describe the user journey and the problem that you're trying to solve. Because if you just say, like, I don't know, make a habit tracking app, but you don't specify anything else, it's still going to be quite generic. But I do agree that, yeah, it has gotten a lot better.
Thank you for the presentation. What do you think about widgets in chats? And also, I know now that they might even be generated live, like the widget can be generated in live by the LLM. What do you think of that pattern?
I think, yeah, honestly, like as a user, big fan of that, because it kind of brings back the GUI side of things. Because whenever, like, back to LooksPricer, the users that use my app are also big fans of ChatGPT. And the reason that I'm winning them over with LooksPricer is that ChatGPT gives like different things every time, and you're kind of lost with a big chunk of text. So now that they're adding more widgets to it and like map support and like all of these different things, I think it is a lot more user friendly. So yeah, that's my take.
There's one question online from Alexander, who is asking, what are the benefits of using Adobe over Figma? Why would Adobe discontinue? Why would Adobe discontinue maintaining Adobe XD?
That I don't think I'd be able to answer because I'm not a designer, so I don't know. But I like, when it comes to designing apps, I think before vibe coding, I was mostly using Figma for a lot of things. Now, when like for Adobe tools, my specialty is Adobe Express, which is their competitor to Canva. And I think I can kind of argue why Adobe Express is better than Canva, but not why Figma is better than other things. So yeah.
Okay. Maybe one question from me to continue on this trend. Yeah. Have you tried Pencil Dev?
No,
have you heard of it? Okay. Just curious. Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I have a bit the same question as him about generative UI. Have you had the chance to play with generating on the fly UI using AI, not in the chatbot, but in a traditional web interface to have a interactive generated UI?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on your use case. And that's kind of what I was trying to say with the example of a financial dashboard, for example. If like the input and what the user wants on a daily basis is clear, but the output is different depending on like current news or other factors, then it definitely makes sense. But I do still think if you're faced with something that is deterministic every time and the user wants the same thing every time, then generative UI is a little bit of an overkill. So maybe you can use it for the brainstorming part, but once you know that there is a specific layout that works for this specific use case, just go with it.
Yeah, makes sense.
I also feel like you might lose users, to be honest. Like,
You might what?
users.
Yeah.
Like,
For the reason she just told you. Yeah, that's true. But
Because,
for brainstorming and more organic way of playing with things, that could be.
Yeah, I think so. For Lux Pricer, we do have like the output that we give with the price estimation is most of the time the same, but if there is a rare handbag, for example, we slightly modify it. So I think that you can definitely use like let the AI generate something new in these extreme cases, because in our case, like if a handbag is rare and there's nothing that comes up that frustrates the user, and so this is where we're using AI to complete it. But yeah, but apart from brainstorming and overcoming edge cases, I would still go with like the more traditional design part. Yes, at the back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, just for the people online. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. So 2 questions. First question is, how early in the process, given the variety of products that you've worked on, how early in the process do you involve users to kind of validate the usability and user experience? And then the second one is, what are your thoughts on how UX and UI kind of shifts as agents now start to be the ones that are interacting with different applications?
So for your first question, I think it depends on whether the product I'm designing, like if I can imagine myself as the user or not. Because if I can imagine myself as the user, I think the testing kind of starts when I start developing, because then I kind of shape it around how I would like to see it, and so it's kind of implicit. When I'm designing things for like other businesses, other use cases where I can't really project myself, I think, yeah, also you need to do this as soon as possible. Like what I like to do is I develop a mockup first and then try to get feedback literally as soon as possible, because the assumptions that we make in this design process depend on like your preconceived notions, right? And so you really need to have this, at least this initial feedback as soon as possible. Down. And even with AI, I think a lot of people rely on AI thinking that you can just say like, I don't know, like pretend you're a truck driver and give me feedback on that. But that also doesn't really work, because you can't observe the user on a day-to-day basis. And you really need their feedback right off the bat, even if you're designing with AI who has access to a lot of different opinions and feedbacks and so on. And then for your second question, yeah, it is true that if we're talking about UI UX for agents, like, I mean, that's a completely different topic, right? Because when an agent interacts with the web, they just look at things that are stripped down, like markdown documents or HTMLs. So I think that there is something to be done there when you're designing like a skeleton of your website, for example, to be sure that like all of your headings are in order, everything is readable for an agent. But I think, I don't know, at least for me, I feel like we're a little bit too early in that, because there are also agents like Perplexity's Comet, for example, who also take into account like screenshots of the website when they're using it. So I don't really know yet how we can optimally design something for agents to be used. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but these are my thoughts so far.
For the agent, there might be also WebMCP that you might be interested into looking into.
Yeah.
Any other question, curiosity?
Thank you. A quick question on the topic of your presentation. What do you think? What will be the next paradigm shift in our interaction with computers? The UX. I mean, thank you.
Interesting. I think so far, like we've made so many bets on what that would be, and some of them haven't worked out. Like the metaverse, for example. I think for a while people thought that this is like the next step, and that didn't really work out. Now, like I see a lot of opinions of people thinking that the web, like it's all just going to be agents. It's all going to be about us like talking to our phones or interacting with video, and like the keyboard is going to be gone, the mouse is going to be gone. I'm a little bit conservative on this end because the like technology lets us perform repetitive tasks. I think that was the point since the beginning, and I don't think that like the button or the keyboard is going to die. But for the next steps, I do think that live agents have a big potential in front of them. Like this is what I've seen with my users so far. If you can instantly and like interact with your interface, it's something that is so far like hasn't really been explored yet. So I see a lot of potential in this direction as well. But I do think that things that were shown in the mother of all demos and like Studio from the 80s, they're not really going away anytime soon.
Thanks. In your slide, which said AI first doesn't have to be visible, this is from the perspective of the user experience. And my question is, do you think along with that, the user should know that it is AI first?
I think it depends on what you mean, because if we are talking about, like if we take the example of social media and AI generated images, I do think that there should be a disclaimer that something was generated with AI or something contains the AI, or like the extension that I developed for Adobe, I specifically mention and let the user opt out of generative AI if they're not okay with it. I mean it more of in like a way that AI is sort of synonymous with chatbot. And that doesn't have to be visible. Like you can hide AI behind buttons if this is what makes your user happy. You don't have to like force them to use an AI workflow they're not familiar with, just because you want to be like ChatGPT and also think that you're missing out if you're not showing AI in a way that is prominent. But I do think that when it comes to communicating with your user on what technology you're using, you should definitely put an AI disclaimer and yeah, announce that you do use it.
There is time for another question.
Thank you for the presentation. My question would be a meta question. Since you seems to tackle on a lot of subject, I would like to ask you what is your process to digest and learn all of this, because AI is moving at a very rapid pace. So do you have some katas or dojo? What is it? How do you keep up with all of this?
The first step is to acknowledge that like you're always going to feel behind when it comes to AI stuff, because yeah, there's a lot of it, and there are a lot of tools that I don't know, and yeah, so I think my process so far is I am basically chronically online 24/7, so I do keep up with things that are happening out there, like follow a lot of influencers as well. And then I also have my own personal advisor who is a lot more tech savvy than me, who is my dad. And so I get all of my news from him. And this is my little secret on how I get, yeah, how I keep in track of everything that's happening. But I do think that the first, like it's easy to get overwhelmed with like all the new tools that are coming out. So instead of chasing everything, just like admit that you're always going to be maybe a little bit behind than other people, and focus on the things that you know how to use, and yeah, and ask your dad for advice.
It's not a question. I just wanted to respond to the previous question, because I I had this feeling that I need to respond. So actually, this is the question that people are asking quite frequently about the ethics, about how much we should expose that this is being used AI. But people forget one thing, that we have been exposed to AI for the last decade at least, without any concern. Every time you open your social media applications, when you open the browser, you're being analyzed and you're being proposed all your feeds, news feeds, etc. This is all AI in a different shape. So, and also as it comes to the photos, let's say 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, people would talk about people should put a disclaimer when they use Photoshop to beautify their photos, or in Instagram they should mention that this photo has been used to filter, etc. I think this is I'm not saying this is bad or good, etc. It's just a temporary thing that with time people will forget about, and this will just dissolve in the mass, because AI will be everywhere. There will be frameworks fully designed with AI in a core, and developers won't even address AI in their coding. It will be already embedded in the way the platform works, etc. So I think investing in putting AI, making AI more visible or invisible, is a waste of time, because it has its natural flow, and the flow will take us to a state where it will just be a magic. Everything will work as we need.
I like half agree and disagree, I would say, because I think you're definitely right when you say that AI has been here, I mean, since the 50s, has it? But I do think that it's still important, even when it comes to like algorithms and personal recommendations and targeted ads. I do think that like on social media, you should get a disclaimer if your data is being used to train algorithms and things like that. And for the comparison with Photoshop, I think I'm still in the opinion that in the perfect world, we should declare Photoshop as well, but that's obviously like not a lot of people would want to do that. And yeah, I do think that in the future, like we are going to have more and more of AI, and it's really up to us to decide now on how we should present it, if we should put restrictions in place and things like that. So we'll see how it will evolve. But for now, I think we should indicate if generative AI is being used or not.
Just as a further comment to what Van said and to your question, I saw many people also overwhelmed more from this democratization. So I can do this, and this, which I wasn't capable before. So also people that now can build a website in 5 minutes or an app, whatever, they have an idea. And it's overwhelming probably for some people to keep the pace on the tool that they can use and to deploy product. I think is one of the aspects maybe that you were also referring to. So to keep up with all the tools that allow people that were not that didn't have the expertise to make many things, but these many things can be overwhelming if you don't canalize in a product that you want to develop and not make like a million things together, which can be at the first, very first and intriguing, but not recommended.
Thanks. Just wanted to ask, so as a full stack developer, do you use Codex or Claude Code? I just out of curiosity.
Yes, all the time, 100%.
Okay.
I think it depends on like how many tokens I have left for the day and the tasks that I have to do. But yeah, I switch between Claude, Codex, Open Code sometimes to Gemini CLI. I mean, now they're migrating to anti-gravity, but Google's product as well. And I think that there is also like a little bit of a debate in the software development community if you should still code by hand or not. And I am more of the opinion that we should like use these AI tools to our advantage, all while like if you have the overall understanding of how software is supposed to be created, like the infrastructure part, the architecture and process, and you tell the AI to do exactly what you want it to do, then you highly minimize the risk of all of these vibe coding mistakes that beginners make. And so, yeah, huge proponent of these tools. I don't think I've written a line of code since maybe a year, but yeah.
All right, we'll end the presentation here. Big thank you to you, Sonya. It was an amazing presentation.
Thank you.